When Kennedy announced the space program, I was a young lieutenant in Fighter Interceptor Squadron at Ramstein, Germany. And when he made that announcement, we all actually laughed at him. We had 15 minutes in space, Alan Shepard up and down, and he's committing us to go to the moon in 8.5 years. Hoo-ha, yeah, sure.
At 89 years old, Apollo astronaut Charles Duke is breaking his silence about what he really saw on the moon. For over 50 years, NASA let his mission fade into obscurity while the world obsessed over Apollo 11. But Duke witnessed something on that barren surface that nobody talks about.
Thing in the space program is volunteer. You volunteer to be an astronaut. I graduated from test pilot school in 1965. After I graduated from test pilot school, I realized the best job you could have is being an astronaut. And so being active military, I had to find, I just couldn't call NASA and say, hey, I volunteered. I had to go through channels through the military.
Something that shatters the sanitized story we've all been fed. The moon wasn't what they told us it was. And with only 4 moonwalkers left alive, the window to hear the truth is closing fast. What Duke reveals will change everything you thought you knew about humanity's greatest achievement. There's something extraordinary about hearing space history from someone who actually lived it. Charles Duke is now 89 years old, and he represents a vanishing breed. He's one of only 4 surviving astronauts who walked on the moon, and his story connects 2 of the most famous moments in space exploration. Most people remember Neil Armstrong's first steps on the lunar surface, but few realized that the calm voice guiding him down was a young man from North Carolina who would later make his own journey to that same desolate landscape. Duke has spent decades watching his mission fade from public memory, while Apollo 11 dominated every conversation about the moon. But lately, he's been speaking out more, sharing details that challenge the sanitized, heroic version of lunar exploration most of us grew up believing. Duke's path to space started in the most ordinary way imaginable. He was born in Charlotte, North Carolina, just another kid lying on his back in the grass, watching planes cut white lines across the blue southern sky. Those contrails became an obsession. While other children moved on to different interests, Duke kept his eyes fixed upward. He was smart, the kind of student who excelled without making it look difficult. By the time he graduated from Admiral Farragut Academy in 1953, he'd earned the top spot in his class. From there, he moved to the United States Naval Academy, where most graduates were expected to spend their careers at sea. Duke had other plans. The ocean didn't interest him. The sky did. After completing his degree, Duke made a choice that raised eyebrows among his Navy instructors. He joined the Air Force instead. It was an unusual move, but it put him exactly where he wanted to be, flying jets and pushing the boundaries of what aircraft could do. Duke wasn't content with just being a pilot, though. He went back to school, earning a Master of Science degree in Aeronautics and Astronautics from MIT in 1964. This combination of flight experience and advanced technical knowledge made him exactly the kind of person NASA was looking for when the space agency started expanding its astronaut program. In April 1966, NASA announced its 5th group of astronauts. 19 men were selected, and Duke was among them. He was thrilled, of course, but he also understood the reality of the situation. Getting selected as an astronaut didn't guarantee a flight into space. There were dozens of qualified candidates competing for limited seats on missions. Some astronauts spent years training without ever launching. Duke could have easily been one of them. Instead, fate handed him a role that would make his voice recognizable to millions, even if his face remained unknown. In 1969, NASA assigned Duke to serve as Capcom for Apollo 11. The acronym stands for Capsule Communicator, and it sounds more technical than it really is. Essentially, the Capcom was the only person in mission control allowed to speak directly with astronauts during a mission. This rule existed for good reason. With dozens of engineers and specialists monitoring different systems, having everyone trying to talk to the crew would create chaos. One voice kept things clear. One person became the link between the spacecraft and the ground. For Apollo 11, that person was Charles Duke. He was just 33 years old. On July 20th, 1969, Duke sat at his console in Houston while the world watched Armstrong and Aldrin descend toward the moon's surface. The landing was supposed to be straightforward, but nothing about spaceflight is ever simple. Armstrong realized the computer was taking them toward a crater filled with boulders. He took manual control, flying the lunar module across the surface looking for a safe spot. Meanwhile, fuel was running dangerously low. Every second Armstrong spent searching brought them closer to an abort. If the fuel ran out before they landed, they'd have to fire the ascent engine and return to orbit. All those years of preparation would end without anyone setting foot on the moon. Duke's job was to keep Armstrong informed without adding to the pressure. His southern accent, which he'd never managed to completely lose despite years away from North Carolina, came through the speakers as he called out fuel levels. 60 seconds remaining, then 30 seconds. Everyone in Mission Control held their breath. These weren't metaphorical moments of tension. Engineers and flight directors actually stopped breathing, waiting to see if Armstrong could pull it off. Then came the words that changed everything. Armstrong's voice, crackling through radio static from 250,000 miles away, announced that the Eagle had landed at Tranquility Base. Duke was supposed to deliver a calm, professional acknowledgement. Instead, emotion overwhelmed him. His response came out garbled, a jumble of words that barely made sense. "Roger, Twank, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We are breathing again. Thanks a lot." That stuttered tranquility became one of the most human moments of the entire Apollo program. Millions of people heard Duke's voice break with relief and joy. It reminded everyone that behind all the technology and careful planning were real people experiencing real emotions. Duke later said it felt like watching his own children take their first steps. He was proud and anxious at the same time, separated from the action by an impossible distance, but intimately connected to every second of it. The psychological weight of that moment never really left him. What's interesting is that Duke became famous without anyone knowing what he looked like. His voice was instantly recognizable to anyone who watched the Apollo 11 broadcast, but his face remained unknown. He was the invisible astronaut, the man behind the console, while others took the spotlight. Some people might have resented that role, spending years training to go to space only to watch from the ground while others made history. Duke didn't see it that way. He understood he was part of something larger than personal glory. His contribution mattered, even if it happened in a room in Texas rather than on the lunar surface. Duke's chance to walk on the moon almost never happened, and when it nearly did, it almost ended in disaster. He was assigned as backup crew for Apollo 13, which meant he trained alongside the prime crew in case someone got sick or injured. During one of the final training sessions, Duke's family came down with German measles. Duke had already had the disease as a child, so he was immune. He didn't think much of it, but Ken Mattingly, the command module pilot for Apollo 13, had never been exposed. Blood tests confirmed he had no immunity. With just 72 hours before launch, NASA made the brutal decision to pull Mattingly from the crew. The risk was too high. If Mattingly got sick during the mission, the entire crew could be compromised. Duke felt terrible. He'd inadvertently cost Mattingly his flight. But then Apollo 13's oxygen tank exploded 2 days into the mission, and suddenly everyone's focus shifted to survival. Duke spent the next 35 hours at Mission Control, helping coordinate the emergency procedures that eventually brought the crew home safely. It was exhausting, terrifying work. When it was over, NASA had to figure out how to reassign crews. In an ironic twist, Ken Mattingly ended up as the command module pilot for Duke's own mission, Apollo 16. The two men who'd been separated by German measles would fly to the moon together after all. Apollo 16 launched on April the 16th, 1972, on a Sunday afternoon in Florida. Duke was 36 years old, making him the youngest member of the crew. Commander John Young had already flown on Gemini and Apollo missions, bringing years of spaceflight experience to the team. Ken Mattingly, the man who'd been pulled from Apollo 13 just days before launch, was finally getting his chance to fly. Their destination was the Descartes Highlands, a region of the moon that no previous Apollo mission had explored in depth. Scientists believed the area would show evidence of ancient volcanic activity, which would help explain how the moon formed and evolved over billions of years. The journey to the moon took 3 days, but once they arrived in lunar orbit, a problem emerged that nearly scrubbed the entire landing. Duke and Young had separated their lunar module, which they'd named Orion, from Mattingly's command module Casper. The plan was for Duke and Young to descend to the surface while Mattingly remained in orbit. But engineers noticed unusual oscillations in the service module's backup steering system for the main engine. This wasn't a minor glitch. The main engine was critical for getting home. If it failed, the crew would be stranded in lunar orbit with no way to return to Earth. Mission rules were clear on this point. If there was any doubt about the engine's reliability, the two spacecraft had to stay docked together. That way, if an emergency abort became necessary, both crews would be in position to handle it. For 6 hours, Duke and Young waited in their lunar module while engineers in Houston ran through data and simulations. Duke later described those hours as agonizing. They'd come all this way, spent years training, and now they were sitting in orbit wondering if the mission would be cancelled. Finally, Houston determined they could work around the problem. The landing would proceed, but it would be 6 hours behind schedule. On April the 21st, 1972, Duke and Young began their descent toward the Descartes Highlands. Young was flying the lunar module, making constant small adjustments based on what he could see through the window. Duke called out angles and distances, letting Young know they were drifting slightly north and west of their intended target. Young nudged the hand controller, feeding new coordinates to the computer. The lunar module touched down just 270 meters from where mission planners had wanted them. It was an impressively accurate landing given the complexities involved. When Charles Duke stepped out onto the lunar surface, he became the 10th person to walk on the moon. At 36, he also became the youngest human to ever set foot on another world. That record still stands, today more than 50 years later. But what struck Duke immediately wasn't the historic significance of the moment. It was the sky, or rather the complete absence of what we think of as sky. Duke had spent months training for grey dust and jagged rocks. He'd studied photographs and practiced in simulators. Nothing prepared him for the blackness above his helmet. It wasn't the kind of black you see on Earth at night. Even on the darkest night, Earth's atmosphere scatters some light. There's always a hint of something, even if it's just the faint glow of distant cities or starlight filtering through air. On the moon, there is no atmosphere. There's nothing to scatter light. The black Duke saw was absolute, a void so complete it felt like falling into nothingness. The contrast overwhelmed his senses. The lunar surface beneath his boots was almost blindingly bright where the sun hit it, reflecting harsh white light. But the sky above was darkness incarnate. On Earth, your eyes adjust, gradually between shadows and sunlight. The atmosphere creates gentle transitions. On the airless moon, there was no mercy, no gradual shift. Every boulder stood out with knife-edge sharpness. Every shadow was a stark black line against bright dust. Nothing softened the divide between light and dark. Duke later explained that photographs fundamentally fail to capture this reality. Cameras flatten the extremes. They compress the dynamic range into something a screen or print can display. What Duke saw with his own eyes couldn't be honored by any image. The human brain struggles to process these extremes, and even the best camera technology of the 1970s had no chance of recording what Duke actually experienced. Here's something that surprised Duke, something that contradicts every romantic image of astronauts gazing at Earth from the moon. They couldn't see Earth, the iconic blue marble hanging over the lunar horizon, that famous perspective that's been reproduced in countless photographs and paintings wasn't visible from where Apollo 16 landed. Earth was directly overhead, sitting at the zenith. The spacesuit made looking straight up impossible. Duke explained it bluntly in later interviews. Looking straight up meant staring at the opaque side of your helmet. The most poetic scene in popular culture, the one artists and filmmakers love to recreate, simply didn't exist for him. The helmet created what Duke described as a fishbowl effect. His field of view was severely restricted. He could see forward reasonably well, but peripheral vision vanished. To look around required twisting his entire torso, fighting against the stiff joints of the pressurized suit. Exploring the lunar surface became an exercise in constant adjustment. The suit was designed for survival, not comfort. Every movement required deliberate effort. Duke had to constantly remind himself to move carefully, to avoid the kind of sudden motion that could throw him off balance. The 1/6 gravity created its own surreal dreamscape. Every step became a controlled leap. Duke and Young both experimented with this during their first moonwalk. Young demonstrated the effect by saluting the American flag they'd planted and launching himself nearly a meter above the lunar dust. Duke captured the moment on film, and it became one of the mission's most memorable images. but the low gravity also created real hazards. Duke attempted his own jump and fell backward, nearly crashing onto the life support backpack mounted on his suit. If that backpack had ruptured, Duke would have had perhaps minutes to live before his oxygen ran out. He later called the jump stupid, an unnecessary risk, but he also understood why they did it. They needed to assert some sense of normalcy, to remind themselves they were still human beings capable of spontaneous joy, not just machines following procedures. The temperature extremes were equally unforgiving. In direct sunlight, surface temperatures reached 27 degrees Celsius. Step into shadow, and the temperature plunged to negative 173 degrees. The spacesuits maintained internal temperature through complex cooling systems, but astronauts could still feel the heat in sunlight and cold seeping through their boots in shadow. Duke described the moon as a place with no middle ground. Everything existed at extremes. Duke believes this stark reality is what history fundamentally misunderstood. Popular culture reduced the moon to a backdrop, a grayscale stage for heroic poses and dramatic flag plantings. Movies showed astronauts bounding gracefully across the surface while inspirational music swelled. Posters depicted them gazing contemplatively at Earth. But what Duke actually experienced was more shocking and more challenging than any headline captured. It wasn't about planting a flag or taking a photo. Those things happened, certainly, but they were brief moments in hours of clumsy struggle inside suits, of disorienting visual extremes, of constant awareness that death waited just outside thin layers of fabric. While the world obsesses over Apollo 11's first footsteps, Duke has watched his own missions slip into forgotten territory. This bothers him because Apollo 16 quietly achieved things that changed lunar science forever. Duke and Young spent 17 hours and 14 minutes on the lunar surface across 3 separate moonwalks. That's nearly 3 full days of exploration. They drove the lunar roving vehicle across 26.7 kilometers of rugged highland terrain, far more distance than any previous mission had covered. They set up the first telescope ever operated from the surface of another planetary body. Not in orbit around the moon, but planted directly on lunar soil. The Far Ultraviolet Camera Spectrograph was a compact, gold-plated instrument designed to capture electromagnetic radiation in wavelengths that Earth's atmosphere completely absorbs. For the first time, humanity could look at the stars from a platform with no air, no distortion, no interference. Duke later called it a window into the universe that no observatory on Earth could match. Yet this milestone barely gets mentioned in most Apollo retrospectives. By mission's end, Duke and Young had collected 95.8 kilograms of lunar rocks and soil. These samples were geologically diverse, containing minerals and formations that told stories about the moon's violent past. The crown jewel was a rock scientist named Big Muley, the largest single specimen returned by any Apollo mission. It weighed 11.7 kilograms on Earth, but only 1.95 kilograms in the moon's weak gravity. Duke found it on the rim of a crater during their first moonwalk. Getting it into the collection bag was a challenge. He couldn't lift it with one hand while wearing the bulky suit, so he had to roll the watermelon-sized boulder up his leg and cradle it against his chest like a baby. Big Muley proved scientifically invaluable. Analysis revealed it was a breccia, a rock formed when a meteorite impact shattered existing material and fused the fragments back together under intense pressure. The rock was approximately 3.97 billion years old. Even today, laboratories continue analyzing pieces Duke collected, extracting new information about the moon's formation and history. Perhaps Apollo 16's most important discovery was what they didn't find. Scientists had expected evidence of volcanic activity in the Descartes highlands. Instead, Duke and Young found impact breccias everywhere they looked. The entire region had been shaped by ancient meteorite bombardment, not volcanic eruptions. This fundamentally reshaped our understanding of how the moon's highlands formed. The astronauts' geology training proved its worth. They recognized the contradiction between what they were told to expect and what they actually found. They collected samples that settled scientific debates. Yet despite these achievements, Apollo 16 remains overshadowed by earlier missions. Duke's 3 days on the moon have slipped from public memory while Armstrong's 21 hours continue dominating every conversation about lunar exploration. At 89 years old, Charles Duke has taken on an unexpected role. He's become a defender of reality itself. More than 5 decades after walking on the moon, he regularly encounters people who believe the Apollo missions never happened. These aren't casual skeptics asking reasonable questions about the technical challenges of spaceflight. They're individuals convinced that the moon landings were elaborate hoaxes staged in television studios with actors and special effects. For Duke, these denials cut deep. They're not just attacks on historical facts, they're personal affronts to the memory of friends who risked their lives and in some cases lost them, pursuing space exploration. Duke has learned to handle these confrontations with remarkable patience. At one public event, a denier approached him with a list of rehearsed talking points, ready to dismantle Duke's story with supposed evidence of fraud. Duke didn't raise his voice, he didn't become defensive or angry. He simply looked the man in the eye and said 4 words that carried more weight than any elaborate argument. "Sir, I was there." Those 4 words represent something no conspiracy video can replicate. Duke isn't speculating based on documents he read or footage he watched. He's not a historian piecing together events from secondary sources. He was the 10th human being to set foot on another world. He guided Neil Armstrong to the first moon landing from mission control. His first-hand testimony is backed by physical evidence that has survived decades of scrutiny, thousands of photographs taken from multiple angles, hours of recorded communications between spacecraft and ground control, and 95.8 kilograms of moon, rocks that still sit in laboratories around the world, available for any qualified scientist to examine. Duke methodically walks deniers through details that only someone who lived the experience could know. He describes the 1/6 gravity and how it felt to take each bouncing step. He talks about the heat that penetrated his suit in direct sunlight and the cold that seeped through his boots in shadow. He explains the bone-deep silence, the complete absence of sound except for his own breathing and the voices crackling through his helmet radio. He mentions the lunar dust that clung to every seam of the spacesuit, creating a smell he later compared to spent gunpowder. These aren't details someone could invent from watching footage. They're the kind of sensory memories that come only from direct experience. When deniers point to supposed anomalies in photographs or claim the technology of the 1960s couldn't accomplish what NASA said it did, Duke responds with facts. He points to the hundreds of kilograms of lunar samples stored at NASA's Johnson Space Center. Scientists worldwide have analyzed these rocks for more than 50 years. They contain isotopic ratios and mineral compositions that would be impossible to fake with 1960s technology. Even more compelling, Soviet scientists examined Apollo samples during the height of the Cold War. The Soviet Union had every motivation to expose an American hoax if one existed. Instead, their analysis confirmed the sample's lunar origin. Duke's credibility stems from his unique dual perspective. He wasn't just a moonwalker. He was also the voice in Houston giving Armstrong clearance to land. He experienced Apollo from both sides of the mission, as the calm professional guiding others through their descent and as the explorer bouncing across the Descartes highlands. That combination makes him nearly untouchable in debates about Apollo's authenticity. He's literally the last living astronaut who can claim both roles. Of the 12 men who walked on the moon between 1969 and 1972, only 4 remain alive. Buzz Aldrin, who took those first steps alongside Armstrong, David Scott, who commanded Apollo 15, Harrison Schmitt, the geologist who flew on Apollo 17, and Charles Duke. The others have all passed away, taking their first-hand memories with them. Duke feels the weight of being among this shrinking group. Every birthday brings sharper awareness that the window for direct testimony is closing. Within a decade, perhaps sooner, there will be no one left who can say they stood on another world. This urgency drives Duke's increased public presence in recent years. He accepts speaking engagements at museums and universities. He records interviews for podcasts and documentaries. Every opportunity preserves living memory before it becomes only written history. At the South Carolina State Museum, Duke told a group of students that standing on the moon was about expanding human possibility. He wants young people to see themselves as potential explorers, not just passive consumers of history. The moon landings shouldn't be viewed as something that happened in the distant past to exceptional people. They should be seen as proof that humans can accomplish extraordinary things when they commit to ambitious goals. Duke talks openly about mortality now that he's approaching 90. He wants his grandchildren to inherit a clear, honest story of Apollo. not as myth or legend, and certainly not as conspiracy bait, but as foundation for what comes next. When they watch Artemis's missions return humans to the moon in the coming years, Duke wants them to see the direct line connecting back to his footprints in the Descartes Highlands. The achievements of the 1960s and 1970s weren't isolated events. They were the beginning of humanity's expansion beyond Earth. Standing on the lunar surface changed Duke in ways that took years to fully understand. The contrast between absolute blackness and blinding brightness felt spiritual to him, as if the universe had been stripped down to its most basic elements. No soft skies, no atmospheric haze, no drifting clouds, just raw light and infinite void. Duke describes this starkness as forcing a confrontation with reality that no photograph could convey. The moon was an environment completely indifferent to human existence. Without the spacesuit, death would come in seconds. The temperature would boil or freeze his blood. The vacuum would pull the air from his lungs. Duke admits this was simultaneously terrifying and sublime. The moon revealed humanity's smallness while also demonstrating our capacity for greatness. During the third moonwalk, Duke and Young engaged in what they later called the Lunar Olympics. These were moments of play amid serious scientific work. Duke attempted a high jump that nearly ended in disaster when he fell backward toward his life support backpack. Looking back decades later, he called it a stupid risk, but he also recognized why they did it. They needed to assert normalcy, to remind themselves they were still men capable of spontaneous joy, not just machines following mission protocols. In interviews over the years, Duke has revealed another dimension to his moon experience. He's become deeply religious, and he now sees his lunar journey through a spiritual lens. "The walk on the moon did not change my life," he said. "The walk with Jesus has changed my life." This spiritual transformation became more significant to him than his achievement as an astronaut. He sees the majesty of creation, whether on Earth or the moon, as evidence of a creator. He views exploration as fulfilling a purpose beyond simple survival or scientific curiosity. From his vantage point on the moon, political borders vanished. National conflicts seemed absurd. Duke saw Earth not as a collection of competing territories, but as humanity's home, precious and fragile against the hostile emptiness of space. This perspective shift is something many astronauts have reported. Seeing Earth from a distance fundamentally changes how you think about human conflicts and priorities. Duke left something personal on the moon during his time there. He placed a photograph of his family in a plastic bag, sealed it, and set it on the lunar surface. He photographed it lying in the dust before covering it with more dust. The gesture was deeply personal, a way to share the experience with the people he loved and to mark his presence beyond the official mission documentation. That photograph remains there today, degraded by radiation and temperature extremes, but still a testament to Apollo's human dimension. It's a reminder that behind all the technology and careful planning were real people with families and emotions. Duke sees the current Artemis program as a continuation of Apollo's promise. The moon was never supposed to be the finish line. It was always meant to be a proving ground, a place where humans could learn to live and work beyond Earth before attempting more ambitious journeys. Apollo demonstrated that humans could venture beyond Earth orbit, survive in hostile environments, conduct meaningful scientific work, and return safely. But the program ended prematurely when budget cuts forced NASA to cancel the final planned missions. 3 Saturn V rockets that could have sent more astronauts to the moon ended up as museum displays instead. Duke sees the moon as essential preparation for Mars. It offers a relatively close testing ground for the technologies and procedures needed for interplanetary travel. If something goes wrong on the moon, astronauts can return to Earth in 3 days. Mars missions won't have that safety margin. The journey to Mars takes 6 to 9 months. Communication delays can reach 24 minutes, meaning astronauts must solve problems independently rather than relying on real-time guidance from Earth. But Duke maintains these challenges are solvable with current technology. The bigger obstacle is political will and sustained funding. Duke's greatest hope at 89 is simple. He wants to see humans return to the moon before he dies. He wants to pass the title of youngest moonwalker to a new generation. The moon, Duke insists, was just the beginning. It proved what humans are capable of achieving. The next giant leap awaits humanity's decision to take it. Private companies are developing new capabilities. Young people worldwide dream of space exploration. The tools and knowledge exist. What's needed now is commitment. Standing on the Descartes Highlands in April 1972, Charles Duke experienced something few humans ever will: the profound alienness of another world, the overwhelming beauty of Earth seen from space, the immediate awareness of mortality that comes from existing in an environment that could kill instantly, and the triumph of being part of humanity's greatest adventure. Now, as one of the last surviving witnesses to that era, Duke carries both a burden of memory and a mission of testimony. His message is urgent because time is running out for first-hand accounts. But his message is also hopeful because he believes human potential remains vast and largely untapped. The footprints he left in the lunar dust 5 decades ago remain undisturbed, a testament to what one generation achieved and a challenge to all generations that follow.